I've been working in the school system for over 20 years, and I don't think I've ever had, all the materials and supplies and equipment that I need or that I should have. There's just a lot of things that we don't have. I mean, I spend over the last 10 years, I probably spent over $10,000 in buying stuff for my classroom.
This is Taya for the Real News Network in Baltimore City, Maryland. The Real News has been investigating the continuing controversy over the future of public education here in Baltimore and beyond. To do this, we have conducted a series of interviews with whistleblower teachers who have come forward to reveal the challenges they face in a system that is chronically underfunded. Today, we have our third installment in that series, another teacher who focuses on the impact of charter schools on his classroom, lack of money, basic supplies, and shrinking curriculum. Here to discuss our latest interview and its implications is investigative reporter Janis. Stephen, can you talk to us a little bit about the fiscal challenges that are facing Baltimore City schools and public education in general?
Well, the Baltimore City school system is right now facing a $130 million structural deficit, which is not unusual for major urban school systems to face deficit. This deficit has been particularly acute and has caused quite an amount of controversy in Baltimore, and has prompted the mayor and other city officials to go to the state to try to find some sort of solution or some sort of bailout or other additional funding. It's also raised a lot of questions about how we got here in the first place, which of course is somewhat of a mystery at this point as to how we're going to handle it. Recently, Mayor Catherine Pugh announced that she was going to dip into the rainy day fund, shuffle around some money from snow removal to fund this and to take care of this.
In Baltimore City, we have a shrinking school population. We've shrunk over the last 3 or 4 years. The population is going down in the school system. The good news is that the population in the elementary school level is growing. But the fact of the matter is at the junior high school level, at the high school level, we have a shrinking population, and everybody's clamoring for the same children, whether you're a private school, public school, or charter public school. But the pool has shrunk. But you've grown, for example, in our city, charter schools have grown up to 40, more than the entire state. So do the math. If the average school has about 50 people working there, including teachers, including administrators, that's 2,000 people that could have been in the public school system that don't have to be hired by the charter public school system.
So Stephen, do you feel like we really understand how we got here and where we're headed in regards to our fiscal standing?
No, I think that's one of the great questions. I mean, when the budget deficit was first announced, it was blamed on declining enrollment and a new teacher contract. But ultimately, there is a counter argument that this is chronic state underfunding, that the state had used the wrong formula over years and had not funded the Baltimore City schools to the extent it should be. We also have had the controversy about the fact that the Baltimore Police Department continues to get the majority of funding in this city, close to half of the discretionary spending, and that education spending or contribution by the city is relatively minor compared to other jurisdictions and hasn't risen that much. So obviously, like anything, it's a culmination of factors, but the question is, what are the underlying political sort of trends that define this? I would say number one is the city's emphasis on policing, criminal justice, law enforcement, and secondly, some of the question of how the state finances city schools. It does contribute almost $1 billion of the $1.2 million budget, but the question is that really enough? So no, we don't really know the full concrete answer of what's happening, nor do we really have a full concrete answer on how this deficit is going to be addressed.
So what did this whistleblower teacher focus on?
Well, this whistleblower teacher focused on, I think, two very interesting things. How this chronic underfunding is affecting schools in terms of his being forced to spend thousands and thousands of dollars of his own money, and how his classrooms are so poorly equipped and falling apart. Much of what the other teacher focused on about physical environment and how the physical environment sends a message to students. And the other thing that was interesting was the way that charter schools affect public schools in a way that we don't think about, that the charter schools can create sort of a brain drain in public education in Baltimore, where they suck away the best students, where they take away the best students and leave public schools pretty much having to deal with the students who are the least capable or the least motivated, as he said. Now, he said, and he makes the argument, I'll let him make it, that you need both, right? And it is a task of public education to have both. But he focused a lot about that sort of continuing deterioration and how things just continue to get worse. So let's take a listen to his interview. Tell us the impact that charter schools is having on you're in a public school. What kind of impact is charter schools having on the public school that you work in?
So over the last 10 years or so, I mean, I've definitely noticed that each year students leave our school and go to the nearest charter schools. We lose a lot of students this way, and a lot of times it's the kids who are, motivated and creative and would participate in different activities outside of the normal, curriculum. So we kind of lose some human capital in a sense, because we're losing some of the good kids that everybody wants to teach. Not that you don't want to teach the bad kids, but when you have a classroom and you've got some high-performing kids and some low-performing kids, they all help to kind of bring each other up. But when you're losing all the top-performing kids, then you're left with a lot more low-performing kids, and it's not the same dynamic in the classroom. Aside from the monetary issues that you're going to lose funding because you have lower enrollment, which is an issue, and some of that is not necessarily the fault of charter schools. I mean, some of it is just kids transfer out, they go to the county or they go to another area in the city, because there is a lot of transient student population that we've had kids that leave out and transfer and then come back 2 weeks or a month later, or they're coming in like this time of year in March or April, they're coming into the school and finishing out the year, and they've been at another school the whole year, or vice versa. They leave our school and they go somewhere else this late in the year, which is not good for their academic performance because there's not very much consistency.
What do you think drives the transient nature of the Baltimore City student?
That's a good question. I think poverty has a lot to do with it. Their family, whatever, they're moving because of their living situation, and so their parents, a lot going on in their lives, and they just move based on what they can afford or where they are able to go, whatever their situation is. And so education is not really the main consideration when they're thinking about where they're going to live. And I think a lot of that probably just has to do with their economics. It's not necessarily that they don't want to send their kid to a good school. It's just they have to consider other things.
Well, so we have declining enrollment, but they're opening more charter schools. Is that a bad strategy to continue to open charter schools when we have declining enrollment in schools in Baltimore in general?
Yeah, I really don't favor the charter school model. I think that charter schools do some good things, but I see no reason why if you have a successful charter school, whatever their model, whatever they're doing, if it works, then why aren't we doing it in the public schools? That's what I feel. I feel like we need to make the public schools just as good as any charter school or better, and that whatever techniques are working need to be implemented in all schools. So if they have extended school day, or if they have classes at night, or if they're doing, whatever it is they're doing that's working, then maybe they should find a way to do that in all the public schools, or the public schools where it's needed.
Well, do they have more flexibility? What advantage do they have?
Well, they have flexibility in terms of they're able to, they don't have to abide by the BTU contract, so they can basically disrespect teachers and not pay them the same, or not hold them. They're not protected by the same rights that they would be under the BTU contract. So a lot of schools may look at that as a hindrance, but I don't feel that. I feel like the contract is there to protect teachers, and that's important. But if you're talking about what kids need, in some cases it may mean that it's going to cost more. If they need psychologists in the school, if they need health care, they need additional staff members to help with whatever issues that they're dealing with, then that's what they need. If they need to stay longer, then that means they need to hire additional staff to run the after school or the evening program. Not say, okay, we're going to pay these teachers less, or make them work longer hours and violate the contract in various ways. I wouldn't agree with that.
But you're saying that charter schools do have seem to have.
And somewhat, how do they?
Well, they seem to have. Yeah, I mean, I'm not an expert on
resources or something.
I'm not an expert on charter schools, but they do seem to have some more flexibility because they're not required to follow all the same rules or regulations that the typical public school has to follow.
And they can be selective with their student population.
They can be, I think, but a lot of them do like some kind of lottery, but I think they do have the ability to, deny kids or expel them if they're not going along with the program. They have more liberty to suspend kids and things like that.
Some teachers have said to us they think it's like sort of a precursor to privatization to have all these charter schools. I mean, Baltimore has the most.
Right.
How do you feel about that idea that they are sort of a precursor to privatizing public education to a certain extent?
I think that's a fair assessment. They're going to try to cut costs, and ultimately the kids are the ones that suffer. Teachers, suffer because they're trying to provide the same level of education with less, or having to put in more time to give the same get the same result.
Now the school is facing huge cutbacks, but we were talking before, there are some resource challenges you're dealing with already. What kind of challenges you're dealing with in terms of resources at the moment, and then what do you think is going to happen once they make these cuts?
Well, I've been working in the school system for over 20 years, and I don't think I've ever had all the materials and supplies and equipment that I need or that I should have when I compare my situation to, say a school in the county. Let's just say Baltimore County. I mean, of course, if I go to Montgomery County or Howard County, can't even really compare because they're just way above where we are. But the county is sort of a fair comparison. So, I mean, I've always talked to county teachers and, gotten their sort of feedback on what they're dealing with and what it's like out in the county. And just from my experience in the city, we've never had, there are years I didn't have textbooks, still don't, or I've had some textbooks, but then they get worn out, torn up, and they're not replaced. Or I don't have enough for every grade level or all the levels that I'm supposed to have. There's just a lot of things that we don't have. I mean, I spend over the last 10 years, I probably spent over $10,000 in buying stuff for my classroom, fixing things that get broken. Teachers spend a lot of money. Now, not every teacher chooses to do that, but if basically the expectation is, I mean, if you want to be a good teacher and you want to do your job, you're going to have to spend some money out of your pocket.
That's something that teachers expect to have to do in Baltimore City?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, and the administration will even encourage you, or say things like, they want you to give incentives to your kids, for example. You got a lot of behavior issues, kids acting up, so they'll suggest, well, give them incentives for doing a good job, or, and so what does that mean? Well, you have to go buy something to give them, whether it's food or candy or pencils or sticker, whatever it is. I mean, they're not giving you this stuff. You have to go buy it. Unless you can come up with some creative way to give them an incentive that doesn't cost anything, and that's pretty hard to do. There are ways to do it, but it's always that you got to be MacGyver. You got to figure out a way to get the job done with less than adequate supplies or materials. So technology, I mean, computers, we have them, not enough, and they're always outdated, they're always old, they're always, there's issues, they're not working. I have to call IT all the time to try to get my computer working right and get it updated, or because of the way the network is and the security and everything, you can't change stuff on your computer if it's a school computer. So you're trying to enter your grades, and it takes a long time, hours, especially if you're teaching in a non-tested area and you have lots of classes. You have 30 classes to administrate and try to grade and keep track. There's a lot of data to enter, and you have a window that you have to supposed to do it. And you don't have a lot of planning time. So of course you're expected to go home and do this at night, and I mean, that's the unwritten expectation, is that you're going to go home and spend your whole evening, entering grades or writing lesson plans, doing all these other things that you can't get done during the regular day. Now, some of that is just, it comes with the territory of being a teacher, but I think it's a little bit extreme. It's a little more, and then when they talk about the funding and they try to blame the new teacher contract and say, well, it was too generous and they're giving teachers too much pay. They're not recognizing that the amount of work that teachers have to go through, with the stuff you got to do just to maintain, just to be able to get through your year, let alone perform at a high level and move the kids to meet some standard that, really is unreasonable. That's not going to, you can say whatever you want. They're not going to meet the standard that you're expecting them to meet until teachers are provided with more of the tools that they need, the staffing, the supports that they need, because you can't, it's like you keep adding stuff to the teacher's plate, something's not going to get done.
You mean in terms of testing or what?
Well, testing, grading, like I said, a lot of administrative tasks that teachers are expected to do. They have the new thing called SLOs, where you have to track kids and demonstrate that they made progress over the period of 6 months or whatever. It's just additional tracking and data keeping and analyzing that you have to do in addition to your regular teaching and testing and everything else, just to demonstrate that you're doing your job, so they can evaluate as part of your evaluation. They keep putting more expectations on the teacher, but they're not taking anything away, like in other words, the class sizes are getting bigger. So if you have 30 kids instead of 25, right, and now you have to do all this, it's just that much more data that you have to wrestle with. And if you're teaching in a non-tested area where you service the whole school, I mean, you're talking about hundreds of kids that you have to grade and follow, and if you want to do a good job and really give the kids feedback and grade their work, it becomes very difficult. There's not a lot of time to get it all done. So somewhere something gets cut, just like in the budget. It's easy for them to say, well, oh, we need to cut this out of the budget. Well, it's the same thing if you're a teacher and you got 99 million tasks to do in a day. Something's going to get cut. Something's not going to get done. And so you can only push someone's efficiency so far.
Well, in terms of resources, has it gotten worse or better, or is it still the same as it's been, like, let's say 10, 15 years ago, since you've been there a while?
It's not gotten any better. It's gotten probably worse. I mean, there were a few years where I used to, I'd say maybe 10 years ago, when I would actually get some money from the principal to buy stuff that I needed for the classroom. That hasn't happened in about 5 or 6 years. Really not any money to speak, nothing. Yeah. I mean, we used to get, like, maybe once they'd give you a couple $100. I mean, I remember getting more than that. The needs of my classroom are different than your average typical classroom, but it's still, it's like you get nothing. And I've been very frustrated because it's like, well, if I'm contributing money out of my pocket, you think that the least the school system could do is contribute something, assist me in my efforts. It seems like there ought to be some kind of budget for supplies and things that are needed. And some of that is even outlined in the BTU contract. So sometimes those things aren't even honored when they're contractually already have been agreed upon. They're running a program now just to have kids save money and teachers and kids save money on electricity, because obviously they have to pay that electric bill, and so they're trying to cut costs by keeping the lights out in the classroom, which is good in the sense that you're teaching the kids about being conservative and saving money, but it's kind of sad that you got to go to those lengths, to function normally. That kids have to be concerned about, turn the lights on and off. There's this old saying that I remember from the '60s that, when it'll be a great day when the Navy has to hold a bake sale, right, to buy a new aircraft carrier, and schools will have all the money they need. And, you know, it's just a sign of the times that we have a president who's now trying to cut and really undermine public education altogether. It gets frustrating. At some point, it's like, well, there's only so much I can do, you know. I'm not going to be able to work a miracle and give the kids the education that I got. I got a great education, and I know what a good education is supposed to be because I experienced it. And these kids aren't getting it, and there's nothing I can do. And that's the thing that really frustrates me the most, you know, because I can only come out of my pocket so much. I can only give of myself so much. You know, I can only spend so many hours after school giving up my life to help these children, you know, which I don't regret doing it. But when is the government, when is the school system, when is the city, when are the parents, you know, when are everybody else going to step up and do their part? The taxpayers, you know, I mean, I am a taxpayer. I would rather have my tax money go to education than go to funding some war that we don't need, you know, in Afghanistan or wherever.
Do you think the kids perceive the lack of resources as sort of a message to them?
Yeah, I think some of them do. I mean, they feel like, you know, they're certainly not feeling like they're a priority. It's tough because the kids have a lot of misperceptions about things.
Like what?
But they understand, you know, that when they see the building falling apart, when they see trash and this, you know, broken doors and things, you know, just everything's not working, the heat is constantly needing to be fixed or repaired, or, you know, those kind of things are disrespectful to the children. I mean, they shouldn't have to put up with that. And a lot of it really is not even efficient. It's not, like the school system actually costing themselves more money by not addressing these things. You know, like there's examples, there was flooding in the school and it went on for years, and they really would just come and have to remediate and do construction or whatever to fix the damage. But until they actually did the construction necessary to stop the problem from happening again, they kept coming in, and so they ended up spending way more money putting Band-Aids on it than they would have if they'd have just done the work in the first place and fix it. And this is the same with the heat and because all the buildings are...
With the heat, it doesn't work? Or?
Well, every year they have to get the boiler going, and, you know, things are, I don't know, the unit in the classroom will be blown out, or it doesn't work, or it needs a new fuse, or whatever it is, you know, and I've actually spoken to the contractors who come to fix this stuff, and this is the same thing they're telling me. It's like, well, it's costing the school more money for us to come in here every year and have to do this than if they just replace the whole system, you know, because then it would be done and they wouldn't have to do, you know, anything for a long time. So when they talk about having a deficit and not having any money, you know, you got to keep that in mind, is that a lot of times they're not spending the money intelligently.
With these cuts coming, what do you think is going to happen? I mean, I know the mayor announced sort of a plan that doesn't seem to be high on details. What do you think is going to happen with the cuts that they're proposing now? Is it as bad as people are making out to be? You know, what's your sense of what could happen? Let's just say to your school, for example.
If they actually were to cut as many teachers as they say they're going to, you know, it would be very difficult. I don't know how they're going to, you know, I really don't know, because we already have in a school with around 600 kids, we've got pre-K, kindergarten, first grade classes with like 30 kids in them. That's a lot of kindergartners, you know, 25 to 30 kids. And I mean, they do have some aides, but they're not with the kids all the time. That's just a lot of kids. So if they're going to now take away a teacher, you know, you're talking about the class sizes could increase 5 or 6 more kids or more than that. And I've talked to other teachers at other schools who they already have classes with 35, 40 kids in them. So
35, 40?
I've spoken to a couple of teachers that have, yes. It's going to have a huge impact on all teachers and the schools in general, because we don't have enough teachers now. You know, used to have like 3 or 4 teachers at every grade level. Now they're down to 2. They pretty much have 2 teachers at every grade level. There might be 1 1 or 2 grades where they have 3.
We used to have 4.
We used to have 4 in 1 or 2 grades. Like they might have had. I remember years when they had like three teachers in every grade level, and then maybe 1 or 2 grades had 4. You know, and so that would get the classes down to like 18 kids or something like that. 15, 18.
Now what do they have?
Oh, now it's like most of the classes are over 20. Easily over 20, 25, 30.